Well, hello, everybody. It really is good to see you through this new medium of video sermons that we're trying. And a warm welcome to all of you right around the whole circuit. It's great to be keeping in touch. And thank you so much for all the feedback, the emails and the phone calls we've had about how helpful this has been. It's been good for us helping to do this in the circuit office. And we're just thrilled it's having a real blessing to the whole circuit. So please feel free to spread this wider. And I know that plenty of people beyond our circuit are enjoying and taking part in these services that we share. So I want to say hello to you as well, and hope you're keeping safe and keeping on praying for a swift end to this lockdown that we're all faced with. I do hope you enjoy what's coming up and share it with as widely as you wish with whoever you wish. God bless. It's a funny time, isn't it? Everyone says it's funny, strange times, and it really is. We live in an era, a time when you can't go out, there's no travel. So it's a bit ironic, really, isn't it, that the most fashionable way we seem to talk about life all around the country at the minute is talking about life as being on a journey. People often talk about journeying together. And of course, there's been a resurgence in that old idea of journaling, recording our journey and our life's thoughts and our life's moments. That's become so popular that even Google does it. It does it for you. It does it without asking. It keeps a track on our movements. It provides a timeline for us. And then it creates photo montages of our journeys, gathers the pictures because it knows when and where we've taken them, and then sets these pictures to music. And it does it automatically. It does on my version of the iPhone anyway. Journeying seems to be the great picture, the great story of what life's about. And yet, ironically, for these weeks, we can't journey anywhere. We're not even allowed to make short journeys. Did you come across that story about the New Zealand health minister, the one advocating that you stay at home? He drove his children just 12 miles to the beach to get them out, just 12 miles, and was caught and reprimanded by the police and was then demoted from the New Zealand cabinet. Can't go anywhere. And of course, the chief medical officer for Scotland, so publicly, so humiliatingly, was caught travelling to her second home for 2 weekends in a row and was forced to resign from that extremely important role. I do think, though, however, we need to look at a couple of journeys. There are two journeys I really want to discuss briefly this Easter, and they're the stories of Judas Iscariot and Mary Magdalene. Journeys are incredibly important and are wonderful things, but I think they need to have a goal, a purpose. A journey that is attempted and yet fails to actually achieve where it's aiming for is a real problem, because journeys take a lot of resource. They're hard work. They take time, they take money, they take sacrifice, because when you're making a journey to somewhere, you're not going somewhere else. You're not doing something else because you're making a particular journey. So I do think that journeying is a good analogy for what it means to be alive, to live a life progressing. So the two Easter journeys I want to briefly look at and to make some historical comparisons are the journeys of Judas Iscariot and the journey of Mary Magdalene. Both are well-known characters and feature predominantly in the final days of Jesus' life. Now, Judas joined Jesus as one of his first disciples and was appointed a sort of treasurer for the group, and was ambitious for himself and possibly for the group itself, but not really for its leader. Matthew in chapter 26 tells us that, well, he quotes Judas speaking to the authorities when he says this: "What are you willing to give me if I deliver him over to you?" So they counted out for him 30 pieces of silver. You see, Judas had an intended journey, all right, but it's not one towards Jesus and Jesus' plans or Jesus' intentions. But his journey was a progression, but it was one towards a version of power and success. but that is always doomed to fail. And Judas's certainly was, and it certainly did fail, that journey. A bit like the journey of Captain John Franklin. He was a British explorer, famous in his time and his era, but largely forgotten now. He was one of the men who had for many years been searching for a northern shortcut from Europe to Asia. People have been trying to do this since 1492, since Columbus had discovered the new land. But no one had ever had any success. And while these explorations that had been going on north of the Americas had added enormously to the knowledge of the Western Hemisphere, everyone had yet to find a safe and a consistent route through the north over the top of Canada to Asia. By 1800, discoverers had shown that there was no passage navigable by ship between the oceans of the Pacific Ocean and the Atlantic Ocean. And that was true right until the Panama Canal was dug. But in 1804, England began to push to complete and to find this fabled Northwest Passage over the top of Canada to navigate towards and beyond the North Pole, and then on towards Russia, and then down to Asia. Over the next 40 years, explorers made many productive trips to the Canadian Arctic. And among one of these explorers regularly was John Franklin. He'd been the second in command of an expedition to the North Pole in 1818 and the leader of two more overland expeditions to and along the Arctic coast of Canada. But in May 1845, he prepared to leave England one more time with two sturdy ships and 129 men for a crew to go and find that still sought after northern passage, to open up the commercial shipping routes and to unlock the vast wealth that that would then allow. The two ships that he commanded were fitted out with the most modern technology of the time. They were reinforced with iron plates, internal steam heating, screw propellers, and rudders that could be retracted into the hull to protect it from the inevitable ice that they would find going through Arctic waters. So with 3 years' worth of food, they set off from England on May the 9th, 1845. They travelled out west, of course, were seen by the whaler, the Prince of Wales, in early August, but were never seen again. 2 years passed with no word, and finally, urged by Franklin's wife and by public concern, the Admiralty sent a search party, which failed to turn up any trace of them, though they looked for many, many weeks. 14 years later, in 1859, parties searching in King William Island, they then found two documents in a stone cairn which had been left by some of the officers of Franklin's expedition. One of the letters stated, "All is well," but the second one, dated the 25th of April, 1848, reported that the two ships had been trapped in the ice by then for a year and a half. The crew had abandoned the ships 3 days earlier, and 24 officers and crew had already died, including Franklin himself 10 months earlier. Their bodies, all of them, were not found until 1981. And Captain John Franklin lost his life and the lives of the other 129 men of his party, searching for the Northwest Passage to provide a new trading route for Europe. But we now know that there was at the time no passage for him to find. Ice permanently blocked the entire area. We now know that it had always been utterly impossible to pass through this area by boat. What he was looking for did not exist. His journey was a tragedy, therefore. Scott of the Antarctic remains a national hero for losing his life on exploration, whereas John Franklin is all but forgotten. His journey was costly, arduous, fragile. But despite the struggle and despite the bravery, it's largely forgotten. because the journey was ultimately and tragically pointless. He was never going to find what he was looking for. And Judas Iscariot, in the gospel story, has a similarly pointless, disappointing journey. To continue his journey towards power and success, he traveled to see the authorities in Jerusalem, driven by the 30 pieces of silver worth a lot of money, driven by the need to see a better kind of power and things to make them move more quickly. Judas becomes trapped by the regret of his action and finally ends his own life in that field of blood that we read about in Acts. Because his whole journey to bring about a successful, powerful opportunity for himself had actually been tragically pointless. His journey had no meaningful goal. There was nowhere safe to land or rest in where he was looking. Was it a good journey? Well, not really. It was never going to succeed. It was never going to achieve what he set out to do. It never was. He just didn't realize that. Another journey, though, rather different, was that of Mary Magdalene. Now, she was a haunted woman. The gospel writer Luke calls her Mary, called Magdalene, from whom 7 demons had come out. She plays a very essential role in the story of Easter. But her story reminds me of someone else, the story of Sarah Winchester. Now, Sarah Winchester had inherited today's equivalent of £500 million, plus shares in her recently deceased husband's company, which gave her an additional income of, in today's money, £23,000 a day. Overnight, in 1881, on the death of her husband, she had become one of the wealthiest women in the world. And so, very soon after that, she began a journey. She moved from her home in Boston on the east coast of America over to the west, into San Jose in Northern California, to find some peace. And she was to do that by buying a dilapidated, unfinished farmhouse in the Santa Clara Valley. And so she began that journey to find peace and continued it from not just the miles across America, but she also had the journey to find peace by building a new home. Now, she chose not to use an architect, and organising the work herself, she hired workmen night and day, literally through the night. And to begin what was to become, therefore, a never-ending building project. That small farm building grew month by month into a sprawling, haphazard complex over 7 floors. It's reported that the work was utterly continuous, with no break for rest days or nighttime even. The work only ceased on her death in 1922, 38 years after it began. And when she died, it abruptly stopped. By her death in 1922, there were roughly 161 rooms, including 40 bedrooms, 2 ballrooms, 1 finished, 1 unfinished, 47 fireplaces, 10,000 panes of glass, 17 chimneys, 2 basement levels and 3 elevators. And it still stands today with little alteration. There is no clear or consistent design anywhere within the building. The most disconcerting of all, many of the passageways and even the staircases lead to dead ends, blank walls. And it's very easy to get lost and impossible to not get disoriented in there. Any journey within the house seems designed to lead you to a dead end. For you see, poor Sarah Winchester had become convinced that she was being haunted. She had moved across America to escape and then built a house that would confuse and confound anything that could be chasing her. For she had come to believe that she was being haunted by the ghosts of all those people killed by Winchester rifles, since the manufacture and sales of Winchester rifles were the source of her husband's and now her tremendous wealth. But her journey had led her nowhere. And her house remains a powerful parable of a pointless journey, with her building a pointless mansion with seemingly endless pointless routes that lead nowhere. It was a wealthy life, but driven by a project that was tragically pointless. Mary Magdalene's journey seemed pointless, but it had begun to change when she'd met Jesus. He had treated her differently to the other men in her life. He treated her like a person, looked at her, spoke to her properly. But her new journey, that looked as if it had run into a dead end when Jesus was arrested, publicly tried, and then shamefully and brutally executed. John 19 says, near the cross of Jesus stood his mother's sister, and Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. At that moment by the cross, her life, and very possibly her entire sense of life, seemed to be, well, it seems to have come to an end. It must have been like a stairway going to a blank wall, a passageway leading to a permanently locked door. So on Easter morning, on the third day after she saw Jesus die, she took another short journey, but to the grave, to place flowers at another locked door, a giant stone in front of a tomb where her life changer had been placed, blooded, broken and destroyed right in front of her. For Mark says that Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of Joseph, they both saw where Jesus was laid. But then, her seemingly pointless journey seemed to have a glimmer of hope, a distant possibility. John 20 says that while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene went to the tomb. And she saw that the stone had been removed from the entrance. She came running to Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one Jesus loved, and said, they've taken the Lord out of the tomb. We don't know where they've put him. So the men run, and they discover the tomb itself is empty. But Mary is left crying, as if at the end of a staircase facing a brick wall. But then, John says this, as she wept, she bent over to look into the tomb for herself. But then she turned round and saw Jesus standing there. But she didn't realize that it was Jesus. He asked her, why are you crying? Who is it that you're looking for? Thinking he was the gardener, she said, sir, if you've carried him away, tell me where you have taken him, and I'll get him. And then Jesus said to her, Mary. It must have been like a wall in front of you turning into a gate into a beautiful garden. It says in John, she turned towards him and cried out in Aramaic, Rabboni, it means teacher. And Jesus said, you don't need to hold on to me. I have somewhere else to go. But I want you to go instead to my brothers and tell them. So Mary Magdalene went to the disciples with the news, I have seen the Lord. In the movie, Elizabeth, the Golden Age, so Walter Raleigh makes a wonderful speech to Queen Elizabeth I. Clive Owen plays him in the film. It's a wonderful speech about a journey across the Atlantic to the New World, a place where he was not sure even existed, where a journey that he did not think he would necessarily survive, a journey that he asked himself, was the journey pointless, or was it a route only to death? I'm going to play it for you now, and you can see that this is a journey that he needed to know it had a goal and a purpose. But what a goal and what a purpose.
For weeks you see nothing but the horizon. imperfect and empty. You live in the grip of fear. Fear of storms. Fear of sickness on board. Fear of the immensity. So you must drive that fear down deep into your belly. Study your charts. Watch your compass. Pray for a fair wind and hope. Pure, naked, fragile hope.
Majesty, the Archduke and the court are waiting.
Let them wait. Go on, Mr. Raleigh. You were hoping?
At first, it's no more than a haze on the horizon. So you watch. You watch. And it's a smudge. A shadow in the far water. For a day. For another day. The stain slowly spreads along the horizon, taking form. Until on the third day, you let yourself believe. You dare to whisper the word. Land. Land. Life. Resurrection. The true adventure. Coming out of the vast unknown. Out of the immensity. Into new life. That, Your Majesty, is the new world.
I think that's something of what Mary saw when she saw Jesus raised from the dead. All her journeys, all her struggles, everywhere she'd been, seemed to be leading her to this very moment of grasping Jesus. All the mistaken, damaging relationships that had led her ultimately to this one relationship, the relationship that could never do her any damage. This one relationship that could never be damaged, not even by death. Her journey was now utterly worthwhile. All the pain and the tedium, all the damage, the heartache, all the fear, all the sickness, all the immensity. Now it was all worthwhile. Nothing could waste her time. Nothing could waste her life or her hopes anymore. And I've come to believe that this is true for you and me. And for some, this knowledge of Jesus Christ, this knowledge of the resurrection, the new life, the new world, for some, it is just a shadow on the edge of the horizon. For some, he's a growing as a presence and a reality in our lives. And for some, his friendship and his authority is indeed the new world in which we live now and thrive. But whichever it is his resurrection that is the knowledge, and the journeys and the lives that we now live are worthwhile despite the of fear and sickness and worry. If he is alive, then millions can attest to that fact. Millions are looking for that touch on the horizon of a life or something that will make our lives worthwhile. If Jesus is alive, then our journeys and our agonies, our disappointments, our frustrations are worthwhile, for they lead us to the very goal of beyond and through death. That, my friends, is the new world. Jesus called it his kingdom. And he still invites people to be part of it and to know the hope and the joy it brings. I hope you know that this Easter. I hope you know it every day. It makes our lives full of joy, full of life, full of hope. Let me pray. Precious Father, we are grateful that you know what life is like. And you don't save us from all the heartache. It's clearly not the way it works, but what does seem to happen is that you make the journey worthwhile. That you draw us through and beyond and out of tough, difficult and painful situations towards that power that is so strong and so full of purpose that not even death can destroy it. So fill our hearts with courage and hope, fragile hope, that we will get through this together. We will get past the disappointments and the sickness of this life, and we will emerge through it, certain of the resurrection, certain of the new world, certain of the new hope and the new life that you promise every Easter. And help us to really realize this, to believe it, and to know it. Amen. Well, amen. Wonderful to see you. Glad you could join me for these thoughts. There is another video you can have a look at, which is a small piece from Matthew's Gospel about the night that Jesus, just a few days before Easter, where Jesus shared that meal, the unforgettable meal. So please play that, and I ask that you would then share some bread and wine amongst yourselves to obey that command. He has few commands to take and eat so that we never forget who he was and what he's done for us. Happy Easter. I hope to see you soon. God bless.